Hello. Last time we heard about the first key, total depravity. Remember Sergeant Major Totes, who taught Barry that it was much worse than he thought with him. All that green goo, terrible stuff. Now Barry's used the second key, and let's see what happens. Barry and Blunderland, Chapter 3, Uncle Dixon, in which Barry discovers that help has to come from another place. Barry opened the door, green, small and sticky as he was, and he stepped through. At once his ears were assaulted by noise. It was the noise of a fairground organ and lots of people's voices, and there was a big banner waving in the gentle breeze of a summer afternoon. The banner read, Uncle Dixon's Fair. And there were tents and rides as far as the eye could see. Now Barry was very conscious of his unattractive appearance, but he hoped his smallness would just let him mingle in the crowd without drawing too much attention to himself. No such luck, I'm afraid. Hello, little fellow, said a big booming voice. Welcome to my fair. Barry looked up into the big, round, beaming red face of a large man in a striped waistcoat. Barry hardly knew what to say. Thank you, he murmured. Are you Uncle Dixon? I'm afraid I've no money. Do I have to pay for something? All he had in his pockets, of course, were the keys, which he'd quickly returned there, a rubber, an old furry sweet, and a wrinkly conker. No money required here, said the man. And yes, I am Uncle Dixon. Take my hand. I'll show you round. You won't want to take my hand, said Barry. I'm all green and sticky, as you see, and I'll make you green and sticky. Uncle Dixon laughed. You are green and sticky, all right, and small, but that's not a bad thing, is it? But you see, my hands are non-stick. And so saying, he took hold of Barry's small green sticky hand and enclosed it in his large pink and puffy one. Let's go. Shall we look inside some of those tents? I'm rather hungry, said Barry. Is there anything to eat? As he asked the question, he peered into the first tent. It was a cafe, and it was very crowded. There was a table laden with food at one end, and people were queuing with plates and piling up their plates. Others were sitting with their platefuls at tables, shoveling food into their mouths, stuffing their faces, and as soon as they'd cleared their plates, they were standing up and making their way back to the queue for the buffet. But Barry noticed two things. All the people were very thin, and none of them seemed happy. So he stood at the doorway to the tent, his hand still in Uncle Dixon's, and he hesitated. Well, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet, said Uncle Dixon. What do you think? Perhaps I should wait until it's less busy, said Barry. I'm small, and it looks really crowded around the food table. Ah, that's the thing, said Uncle Dixon. It doesn't get less busy. People don't tend to leave, you see. They keep going back for more. Some of these folks have been here for years. Barry asked, but don't they get full up? You can't go on eating all the time. Uncle Dixon replied sadly, but they do. This is food that doesn't satisfy. That's why they're all so thin. But they think that if they go back one more time and try something else, some new dish, that will be the answer. But it never is. I don't think I'll go there then, said Barry. Thank you for the warning. Here's something to keep you going, said Uncle Dixon. He reached out to a passing barrow and picked up a sausage in a bun. Try this. It's a dot hog. Don't you mean a hot dog? Asked Barry, happy to take it and bite. Now, would I give you a dog to eat? Said Uncle Dixon. We don't eat dogs in Blunderland. Whatever next? Barry didn't care what it was called. It was jolly tasty. Thank you, he said, and happily munching, he allowed Uncle Dixon to lead him into the next tent. Here there were people scribbling at tables. Their heads were down. Are they taking an exam? Whispered Barry. It was very quiet in there. Well, they think they are, said Uncle Dixon, but the pass mark is rather high. No one ever reaches it. Oh, that's a bit sad, said Barry. Perhaps, said Uncle Dixon. But this is a fairground. How could it be fair to give a prize to the cleverest? People only have the brains they were born with, and they're all having fun making their own game of it. As Uncle Dixon said that, a bell rang, and one of the examinees stood up and shouted, I'm the fastest. And someone else shouted, but my answers are the curliest, and mine are the blotchiest, and mine are the longest, and mine are all wrong. And they all began arguing amongst themselves, jumping on the tables and shouting. Barry giggled. See what I mean? Said Uncle Dixon. I tell them they don't have to stay, but they will do it. This tent is very popular. They walked on. Would you like an ice smile? Asked Uncle Dixon, and he handed Barry a cone with something cold and soft and white on top. Don't you mean an ice cream? Said Barry. Do you? Said Uncle Dixon. Well, I wouldn't eat it then if it makes you scream. And so they walked on, and the afternoon wore on. Barry took some rides on things that whizzed up and down and round and round. Then he did scream, just a bit. As he got off the third ride, he began to feel sick. That's enough of that, he said. Yes, said Uncle Dixon. You never get anywhere, do you? Disappointing. They saw a tent where people were dressing up with fancy clothes and makeup. There was another one where there was a very tall staircase going up to a door in an incredibly high tower. Some very fit young people were limbering up, ready to race up it, but as the first runner reached the bottom step, the stairway became an escalator, a down escalator, so as fast as they ran up, they came down, but they kept on trying. I keep telling them there's a lift, said Uncle Dixon, but they don't listen to me. The sun was going down and Barry was getting tired. One more tent, little fella, said Uncle Dixon. What's the matter? Have you not enjoyed my fairground? Well, I have, said Barry, who'd been brought up to be polite, but it seems that none of the competitions get you anywhere, like you said about the rides. And I know that shouldn't matter, but it does, because at the end of the day, and it is the end of the day, I'm still small and green and sticky, and I don't like it. Now that, said Uncle Dixon, is why you need to come in this last tent. Not many people come to this one, even though it stands open, and I'm often to be found out here shouting, roll up, anyone is welcome. What do you do in it? Asked Barry, because the tent looked large but empty, although there were some railway lines and a platform. You don't do anything. You wait. That's what people don't like, said Uncle Dixon, smiling. Look, here it comes. And there was a whistle, and along the track came a small railway locomotive, pulling just one coach. The train driver leant out of the window. Train, someone name of Barry, he said. There you are, said Uncle Dixon. Looks like you were chosen. As he said that, the door of the coach swung open. Get in then, said Uncle Dixon, giving Barry a gentle nudge. Are you coming with me? Said Barry, suddenly nervous. No, not now. This one's been sent just for you. It's all in the schedule. Don't mess it about. These things run on rails, you know. Barry barely had time to climb aboard and sink down on a seat. When the door slammed shut, the train gave a lurch and it began to roll away. He peered out of the window to get a last glimpse of Uncle Dixon, but the big man had vanished, and Barry was on his way, and he realised he'd forgotten to ask where the train was going. And so we come to our second key. Our second key teaches us about the doctrine of unconditional election. Uncle Dixon, unconditional election. And it answers this question: who actually will go to heaven? And who will have their sins forgiven? Will it be the clever people? Will it be the beautiful people, or the ones who give most money to charity? The Bible's answer is those whom God has chosen. Jesus invites everyone to come to him. It's not a competition and it's not a trick. Whoever trusts in Jesus will be rescued from the punishment they deserve for their sin. Yet those who come discover this amazing fact that they have come because they have been chosen. They know that they did not deserve it, and they couldn't do it on their own. And yet, just as Barry found the train coming just for him, they find God running to meet them, even as they begin to turn to him. Isn't that wonderful? In the Bible, Jesus talked about this himself once. And he said this: all that the Father gives me, you see, those he's chosen, will come to me. And whoever comes to me, listen, I will never drive away. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I shall lose none of those he has given me, but raise them up at the last day. For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life.